When it was announced in 2021, I asked for Skyward Sword HD for my birthday. I immediately enveloped myself into this epic Zelda adventure, and over the course of under 10 playtime hours, I had made it to around the second dungeon. And then I quit. I just didn't see the appeal in this game. And I knew it had a certain quality that was for some people, don't get me wrong, but I just got this feeling that it wasn't for me. But earlier this year, I picked it back up and completely changed my opinion. Instead of comparing the experience of Skyward Sword to my optimal single-player game experience, I started to appreciate it for the experience that it was. So without further ado, here are my thoughts on The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword. Probably one of the strongest aspects of this game is its storytelling, lore, and timeline implications. I won't go too far into it, but the story arc is presented at a very good pace, and keeping with Zelda tradition has some wacky time travel. Each cutscene keeps you interested in your chase for Zelda, urging you to learn more about what's happening by advancing. During the course of the game, you'll learn about the beginning of Hyrule and why all the previous and to-come games will exist. From my experience, the largest aspect of this game is by far the puzzles. The dungeons all have a unique layout, although my one problem is that you have to backtrack sometimes through them, or even come back and just recomplete them altogether. Even so, they recycle the layout and change the environment just slightly in order to alter the gameplay. I think this side of the game attempted to be the epitome of the Zelda dungeon formula, and though it follows the general rules, I think a few times the answer to a puzzle is just a bit too irrelevant, which has you stumped on one thing for quite a while. It does keep and correctly use staple items in the franchise such as a bow, claw shots, bombs, the bug net, and a slingshot. It also introduces a few unique items like the whip, beetle, and gust bellows. The best part about these items is that although they can be used to solve the puzzles, they also have applications out in the world such as collecting, combat, uncovering hidden secrets, and most importantly, movement. If someone wanted to play a Zelda game and was into problem solving, this is the game I would recommend to them. The game has a very pretty and appealing art style. At first I didn't like it compared to the cel-shading cartoon style of Breath of the Wild, but I soon realized that this is actually so much better. I also realized the real problem with the graphics were the blurry textures on some objects and flat surfaces. These probably weren't too bad on the Wii's resolution, but they could have used some touching up to optimize the beauty of this ancient Hyrule. If the game did have cel shading, it would still be visually appealing, but it wouldn't nearly live up to its current form. It has a matte charm, and I feel like if everything was glossy, it would ruin the drier mood. In my opinion, bosses are a vital part of any Zelda game. If you have a lineup of bosses to where the player can't choose their favorite and can't specifically pick out one that they hate, you succeeded. Why the bosses stick with the previous topic is that they're almost like puzzles themselves. After figuring out what you must do, you have to time it correctly in tandem with observing the patterns. Some bosses look good, some look bad, all of them are very unique, but a few are definitely poor design. I feel like they would have been way more pleasing if it didn't stick so much to the whole hit weak point and slash away Mario idea. Slashing away actually leads us into our next section. There's a lot to touch on here, but I'm going to be pretty brief about it. The idea of being able to swing your sword in 9 different ways and pull out your shield at the correct time to knock back opponents probably both sound great in theory, and so the system works well for all basic enemies. But I wish it would have had some use in fighting other bosses besides the 2 main antagonists. Many people may think of this game as the polar opposite of the open world games, being so linear and all. But if you think a lot more of the mechanics and things this game introduced, those games owe a lot of what they are to this underrated gem. Things like shield durability, the parrying mechanic, and even item collecting and selling. Many people think this game influenced Breath of the Wild because the devs saw they needed to do the exact opposite, but I think it told them to do the exact same thing, but open it up a little. Now, this aspect of the game differs depending on what version you're playing, but here's my opinion on both the controls options. So something I didn't mention is that I briefly played the Wii version of this game as well, and let me just say, the motion controls on that version are phenomenal with the Wii Motion Plus. It gets your movement and angle almost exactly correct, and with not much input delay. On the Switch version, not so much. The whole problem stems from how the motion controls think differently. Instead of having a good idea of where you're actually pointing because of the Motion Plus and the sensor bar that you're currently pointing at, it has you reorient by pressing Y at the center of the screen, which on paper sounds just fine, but you end up doing this 10 times a minute. I know many people will disagree with this, but I really prefer the button-only controls. The fact that a ported motion-reliant game has non-motion controls is amazing. Along with the story and puzzles, I think the third and final thing Nintendo did so well in this game is the audio, but namely the music. Every track that's played so far in this video is from the game's OST. I think Ocarina of Time's soundtrack was amazing, but it's nowhere near this game's. The dungeon themes do one thing better than a lot of games. They aren't so repetitive to where you'll want to turn off the audio altogether. If you've played through, beaten, or just messed with this game a little, please look up Skyward Sword's Staff Roll. The song plays in the credits, and the awesome feeling of completing a Zelda game is increased tenfold by this anthem, an epic amplification of most of the main song from this game. No shade to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's credits, but those more mellow themes are great and all, but an emotional yet adventurous orchestra is just so much better. Is the area linearity a bad thing? Well, this definitely isn't the answer you want. The area linearity isn't much of a problem at all. But it can feel so limiting when you've just gone through a forest, dungeon, then spring, then a volcano dungeon, another spring, then you're thrown into a desert and you know what's coming. You never would have guessed, dungeon, spring. But overall, the quest is very nice. Though where you can travel is often constricted, when you do get to a new area there's often a new gimmick. What I love about Lanayru Desert is the time shift stones. This certainly adds fun gameplay, not to mention so much lore and variety. Even when you revisit an area, such as going to Death Mountain for the last time to get a piece of the hero's song. First of all, there's not a Silent Realm again, but a unique challenge where you have to regather all of your stolen equipment back from the monsters. When you get an upgrade to your Diggy Diggies and now you can go down in Diggy Diggy, the sky is a whole different story that I can't go far into. But let me just say, flying around is really fun once you get the hang of it, though it can get repetitive. The idea of shooting goddess cubes up to the sky to make valuable items appear up there is really cool. I really like this mechanic, and I'm planning on collecting all of them. These are the things that keep a closed-off world intriguing. So those are my thoughts on the masterpiece Zelda Skyward Sword. If you want more retrospect-style videos like this, please consider checking out the Ocarina of Time video and even subscribing. Please feel free to comment your experience with this game down below. HL out.